get underway. We also have Councillor Sanderson. Glad he's joined us. So here we are at the Communities in Place Overview and Scrutiny Committee on Wednesday, the 7th of October. Still virtual, as we can all see. The first item on the agenda is the membership, and we have two changes. We have Councillor Stowe and Councillor Horncastle joining us, rising stars of the Conservative group. We're glad to have you on board the best scrutiny committee the council has, and we hope you enjoy the time you're with us. And so, welcome. The next item on the agenda is apologies. Do we have any apologies?
Chair, we've got apologies from Councillor Dunbar.
Excellent. Okay. And let's see, Councillor Gallagher's caught us up now, so that's great. So the next item on the agenda is the minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 16th of September. Are you happy that they're a true reflection of what was done? And if you are, I shall sign them and send them in. I don't see anybody complaining, so thumbs up. Agreed. Excellent. Next is disclosure of members' interests. You only have to declare stuff that you haven't already declared, if that makes any sense. And the next thing is on the agenda itself, which is the forward plan of cabinet decisions. And I don't know whether Sean wants to say something on this.
Chair, this is the forward plan of decisions that the cabinet are being asked to take. You'll see there's one item that affects this committee, and it's the waste strategy and glass collection. And of course, it's on your agenda today. So it's just to give you assurance that the items that are listed for the cabinet could also be subject to pre-scrutiny, Chair. Excellent.
Thank you very much, Sean. The next item on the agenda then is a scrutiny of cabinet reports, and the first one is the waste management strategy proposed trial of curbside collections. Now, I don't know whether Councillor Sanderson wants to say something first, and I shall bring Paul Jones in, or the other way around. I can see by nodding heads that Sanderson wishes to speak first, so go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just simply wanted to say that this has been quite an important bit of work for us to do. It's taken quite a while in its gestation, but we are ready to go to Cabinet with it next week. But it was important to me to hear the views of scrutiny first. It's something that is kind of the next big step we want to take in improving our recycling rate, which is not nearly good enough for various reasons. And that's, so this is a very important first step. It's quite a complex scheme, and Paul is I know completely au fait with it, and we'll describe it, but I'll take any questions when he's finished. Thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you, Leader. So, Paul, do you just want to take us through this, and then there'll be, do you want questions as we get to them, or just questions at the end?
Questions at the end, if that's okay.
Fine. So bear that in mind, members. Listen carefully, jot down what you want to ask, and we'll come to you at the end. Okay, Paul, start. Yeah.
So, as I'm sure you're all well aware, we put in place a waste strategy back in 2003 that runs till 2020 that enabled us to take forward a really fundamental shift in the waste management arrangements within the county. So back in 2003, we were landfilling 95% of Northumberland's waste and only recycling around about 5%. And at the moment, we've hovered between 36, 37, up to around about 40%. It's dropped in recent years, but only landfill around about 10% of waste. So there has been a fundamental shift in how we manage waste in the last decade or so. And that's, you know, on the back of the investment that the county council's made in the improvements to those services. But clearly, we need to review our own strategy. It's coming to the end of its life. The government's also put forward new strategic policy and guidance that it's formulating in terms of the national picture on waste management. So it's an opportune time for us to look at our waste strategy. You know, we're not complacent. We want to continue. Our existing arrangements have served us well, but we need to take those forward and to look at how we can improve that. And the key thing there, and it's consistent with what the government have put forward in their draft strategy and policy approach, is that it's to get to a plus 50% recycling rate, and also to have collect a consistent range of materials. We expect the government, as part of their policy approach, based on what's been released to date, to be requiring legally all local authorities to be collecting glass, a wider range of plastic materials. So we currently collect plastic bottles of any kind of description, but that will be extended to pots, tubs and trays, so your yogurt pots and other plastic packaging type materials. Cartons, which includes your food cartons, so things like soft drinks, where you get your cartons in like wax paper and Tetra Pak type cartons, and orange juice, and also food waste, as in kitchen waste from your kitchen as a separate waste stream in its own right as putrescible, so that can be collected separately and processed. So that would be a fundamental change to the existing arrangement in Northumberland. So what we've been doing for the past year or so is basically working with the Waste Resources Action Programme, which is a part of the government-sponsored organisation, and with them and with consultancy support provided by them, looking at the options within Northumberland as to how we can adjust our existing arrangements in a managed way to achieve those wider objectives of a plus 50% recycling rate, still managing to provide a consistent and high quality service to the householders, and to do that on an affordable value for money basis. So that has been a significant piece of work. It's entailed a lot of modelling and a lot of activity behind the scenes. The report tries to capture that and distill that down, and fundamentally that's been distilled down to two key approaches. One is the commingled approach, which is basically building on our existing refuse collection and recycling service, where basically the recyclable materials are placed in a single container and are collected in a mixed form and then separated out at a processing plant. So it's very simple for the householders to use. It's cheap in terms of the collection arrangements, and it requires that technology and the investment in the back end of the process. So we've looked at that existing service area and looked at how we can expand and adapt that. And the modelling's identified that the most appropriate way forward to do that is to basically add in additional materials. So to add in additional pots, tubs and trays to that commingled bin, add in the beverage cartons to that commingled bin, but then to have separate collections with separate containers of glass and also food waste. The other alternative approach is what's described as the curbside sort, and that's a system that's used predominantly in more urban areas, where basically householders are required to a degree, segregate the materials themselves into different containers, and those containers are then put out for collection. And there's also then some further sortation activity that takes place actually by the staff on the curbside, loading that material into separate stillage type vehicles. So on those types of recycling arrangements, what you generally have is the fibre material, so newspapers, magazines, things such as that in a separate container. You have plastic bottles, plastic trays, and beverage cans and food cans in a separate container, and then you have glass in a separate container. But they still require the operatives to sort through the plastics and the cans and things such as that into a further sortation. And again, with that arrangement, it would also require a separate collection of food waste, because that's one of the mandatory requirements that we expect to come from government. So when we've looked at those, and there is an infinite number of permutations as to how you would collect the materials. We've looked in total of over 24 different types of permutations in terms of different types of vehicles, different types of stillage vehicles, single pass vehicles. So basically you have like a 3-compartment vehicle that can collect everything on one go. And fundamentally what that comes down to is the table on table 4, it's on page 11, that highlights and summarises the relative merits of the different collection arrangements. So what that's shown us is that basically there are 3 of the key collection arrangements or permutations of that will achieve a plus 50% recycling rate. Of those, the one that's the lowest revenue cost, so the lowest running cost for the authority, and also the highest performer in terms of the recycling rate, is option 1C, which is effectively an expansion of our existing curbside collection arrangements to include a separate collection of glass and a separate collection of food waste, and phasing in over time within the normal recycling bin the additional pots, tubs and trays and other materials such as beverage cartons as part of that. The benefits of that are that it builds on those existing services. It requires the least change to the actual sortation arrangements for the back end, because even on the curbside sort arrangements, when we've had further dialogue with our contractor, what they've highlighted is from their experience, and they're an international waste company that provides services across the UK and Europe, that fundamentally the low-grade materials that you get even on a curbside sorting arrangement still require further processing to separate out the different grades of paper, to separate out the different grades of plastic. So effectively, you're paying for a lot of additional staff, additional vehicles to collect it in that manner, still to then have to process it at a plant at the end of the day, which can process it in a raw form anyway. A key element of the costings as well is the fact that all of those collection arrangements expect there's a monthly collection of glass, a weekly collection of food waste. And because we go to a weekly collection of food waste, so that's the organic fraction or the putrescible fraction of the waste stream that will rot down quickly and create odours and problems with flies and things such as that, because that's collected and effectively taken out of your general household rubbish bin, it means that we can then go to a 3-weekly collection cycle for the what's left over as residual waste that will be going through an energy from waste facility to generate electricity from. That is a fundamental issue, in that clearly that requires us to have the food waste in place, but it also requires the government to consider that to be unacceptable. And as part of their consultation process, they have indicated that they expected in the first draft that there would be a minimum fortnightly collection of waste materials. There are already a large number of authorities that have 3 weekly collections for residual waste when they've got food waste in place, and we expect that is something that the government will listen to and shift, because it effectively helps make the whole system more affordable. So that's what we consider to be the most sensible way forward for the long-term arrangements in Northumberland. What we propose in terms of the next steps is that, because everything's very much up in the air at the moment, we're still waiting for the government legislation and further consultation to come back in the current year, and more, I think more likely into 2021 now, in terms of what will be their key requirements in terms of the consistent materials. Until that legislation's firm and we know what the actual expectations and the arrangements are going to be, and most importantly, how these new services will be funded, because as part of the government's policy, they're also looking at what's classed as deposit return schemes, which is basically like a reverse vending. It's back to the good old days where you get 10 pence for your glass bottles when you take them back to the shop, but looking at an automated process for that to include all of your food and beverage containers, plastic bottles, plastic steel cans, aluminium cans and glass bottles. So that is a fundamental shift. But they also talk about an extended producer responsibility, where basically the manufacturers of these goods will also, through taxation arrangements, have to pay for the whole life cost of producing the materials that they produce, which basically creates a funding stream that we expect will be provided back to local government to help finance the collection of these materials at a higher level. So what we need to wait until that information is crystallised and we know where things are at. But in the meantime, what we're proposing is that we undertake a glass collection trial to test some of the assumptions in the modelling, to see what the costs and participation levels and the yields in terms of the amount of glass per household that we can get out of the collection arrangements, so that we're in a position fundamentally where when that legislation is crystallised and the funding arrangements become clear, we're in a very strong position to be bidding for funding to take forward and invest in our services in Northumberland. So we're proposing a glass trial that's looking at 4,000 households. It's 1,000 households on each route. We're looking at 4 separate routes in Bedlington, Hexham, Alnwick and Morpeth. it's been an operational decision in terms of the identification of those areas that's been made by officers, and that's been based on the areas being close to our depots. It's in terms of the areas having a suitable demographic mix, so they're representative of Northumberland as a whole. So we're getting a statistically valid outcome from the service and from the pilot scheme. And also for the areas geographically to be self-contained, so it's clear for both collection staff and also for the people living in those areas that they're in the scheme. So things like making sure that it's in a housing estate, for example, and not on one side of the road and not the other, are things that we try to resolve as part of that. We will be undertaking the collections with existing staff, using existing vehicles and just staff working overtime, basically 3 staff working overtime per collection once per month. There are costs associated with that, but those costs have already been accommodated within the budget provision in the current financial year. So it's a £43,000 revenue cost and a £62,000 capital cost. The capital costs to purchase the containers, and we're proposing to use 140 litre wheeled bins for the collections. The reason for that is because we're looking at a monthly collection, so once every 4 weeks there'll be a large physical volume of glass in those containers that's going to be too heavy to easily lift. So from a manual handling perspective, we would want to use the bin lifts on the back of the vehicles anyway. We're also conscious that by having that, it's easy to wheel around. The smallest types of wheel bin you can get, so they're easily able to be accommodated within properties, and that enables us to collect the glass in that manner. So that's what we're proposing to do, and that's what the recommendations outline, both in terms of the long-term proposals for the waste strategy, but also in the intervening period to progress a 12-month glass trial, just to help us be in the best possible position to bid for funding to improve our services when the government finally decides on the national waste strategy and the funding arrangements behind that. Thank you.
Excellent. For a very full report. I appreciate it, Paul. Right, questions to Mr. Jones? Anybody? Councillor Heppel.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Paul, completely in agreement with the glass collection. The more we can recycle, the better it is, not just for us in Northumberland, but the planet as a whole, I think, and it fits with the climate change as well situation. So I'm all in favour of this, I have to say. Just a couple of questions. One of the difficulties, and I'm thinking more longer term now perhaps, but one of the difficulties is going to be how households react to this. So there needs to be some clear messages, instructions, information, if you like, given to them. The other thing, when you talked earlier about weekly collection of food waste and moving to 3 weekly collection cycle, I'm now referring to it as a blue and green bin. That's the way I understand it. Which bin were you talking about there? Is that the normal fortnightly collection of existing recycling or general waste?
Yeah, so basically at the minute, as I'm sure you're well aware, Councillor Heppel, we have a fortnightly collection cycle. So it's 1 week of one bin, 1 week of the other, using the same vehicles, the same crews. Under the proposed arrangements going forward to meet that higher recycling rate, and if food waste is undertaken on a weekly cycle, we would be looking to switch the general residual waste to a 3 weekly cycle, but probably still stick to a fortnightly cycle on the recyclable materials.
Okay. Yeah. Is that you're right, Alan? You need to come back.
Don't ask us what colour bins we're talking about, because we've still got far too many different colours of bins as well. But in terms of the actual glass recycling trial, as you'll see in the report, because it's a trial, we're basically just using standard carcass bins, so that they're just the brown or black body bins, but we'll be putting on a purple lid. So basically, if ultimately the trial, we decided different container would work better, we can recycle and reuse those 140 litre bins, because that's what we give to people at a single household or single individuals in households that don't need a bigger 240 litre bin currently. So it means that we're not basically wasting the money. The only loss we'd have would be on the lids, and they're just a couple of pounds a piece.
The only one that didn't Paul,
then Rupert. So, Councillor Carty.
Hiya, Paul. I think it's a really good idea. They do this in Portobello in Scotland. They have 4 different types of collections. The glass collection is actually just put in a stacker box, and they collect the glass in the stacker box. They do the food waste. They do the blue bin like we've got in the green bin. I think it's really good, but I've got one little niggle, and the little niggle is the 3-weekly cycle for the green bin. I think sometimes you see people's bins overflowing to start with when it's only even a 2-week cycle, and I just think 3 weeks for that particular bin might just be pushing it a bit. But I do agree with everything else, and I agree with the glass one because I see it works in Edinburgh and places like that really well. But I just have that little bit niggle about the green bins because there is a lot of overflowing green bins in certain parts of life. Okay.
Yeah, I think in response to that, clearly the expectation is that because you're providing all those different services, you want people to make use of those services and to segregate those elements of the waste out. Clearly, if they don't participate in that and they're just slinging everything still in one bin, that bin's not going to last them. But fundamentally, in terms of just trying to reduce the overall cost and also the overall climate impact of having a higher, more services, higher frequency collections, and like changing from a fortnightly to a 3-weekly collection for the general waste bin basically enables you it makes the whole service much more affordable to achieve that 50% plus recycling rate.
Okay, Councillor Carty, thank you. Then Councillor Gibson, then Councillor Gallagher.
Sorry about that. Yeah, 2 questions really. One is glass color. Obviously, well, at the moment, most of my glass, I take into Hexham and put it in and it asks you green or colored and white. Presumably in this system that we're proposing, all colors will land up in the bin, so they'll have to be sorted somewhere else, will they? That's the first question.
So that's one of the reasons why we're taking it forward as a trial. That yes, all the materials would go into especially mixed glass. What we find is that the technology and the glass reprocessors is advancing all the time. So there's now already numerous of the glass reprocessors that you use it for remelt that actually are able to do colour segregation technology at the front of their process that enables them to separate the different colours, effectively the clear glass from other colours of glass, because clear glass has the highest value. If you can't do that, there's still processes that will take the mixed colours, and there's also different uses for the mixed colours. So it's both the mixing of the colours is one issue, but it's also the particle size. So the more the glass gets broken down, the less easy it is for that technology to work, and the lower the value of the material as well. So one of the things from the trial is also seeing how much does the glass get broken down by going through that cycle in the back of the bin wagon and through wheel bins, because if it gets broken down to very small particles or shards, that makes it a lower value material in terms of the end markets. That then limits the number of end markets that we have. And fundamentally what we want to try and do is to maximize the amount of glass that goes back for remelt, because that has the highest environmental benefit. There's other uses for glass, recyclable materials that turn it into glass fibers in insulation materials and other things such as that. And also as a secondary aggregate, but those are all far less environmentally beneficial. So we want to maximise the environmental benefits of collecting it, and that's part of the process we're undertaking a trial as well, to see can we maximise the amount of remelt that we get out of this process as well.
And my other question is, it's quite interesting. Well, a couple of lines in the report, but 7% is the basic amount of glass that you know, or 7% of the rubbish. But that probably doesn't cover the bottle bank stuff, does it? But my question really is, what will you be able to take it all? And what difference will it, or what the stuff that's left in the normal rubbish bins, as we, you know, we don't have blue here, we're green and black, but I don't chuck that much glass away. It's only things that you really can't clean and that type of stuff. How much, what happens to that glass at the moment? Does that land up in landfill, or does it go to the Middlesbrough or Teesside or wherever that stuff goes? And
yeah, so we do have a very comprehensive bring glass recycling network of facilities. We have over 100 facilities currently where people can take the glass to, as you rightly describe. And that takes all your jars, glass bottles, the whole shebang. It is the same material that we'll be looking to target as part of the trial. So we are looking at, you know, your beer, wine bottles, your tomato sauce jars, your, you know, food sauce jars and things such as that. What we don't want is any crockery or Pyrex type materials, because fundamentally they're different types of material. You can't reuse those back into glass remelt. You create significant issues with that. In terms of what happens to the glass that people, if they don't recycle glass currently and they just put that material into their general household waste bin, that material goes down to our energy from waste plant in Tees Valley. It goes through a combustion process where it's basically used as a fuel to generate 9.6 megawatts of electricity for the national grid. Now, clearly, glass is inert, so having glass within that system adds no value to the energy recovery process. It's basically just additional weight that passes through that process. The material that comes out of the furnace bottom ash, which will include glass as well as just the general ash residue from the combustion process, is recycled back as an aggregate and used as an aggregate material. But clearly, taking glass out of people's general household waste bins, so we're not having that material end up going through the energy recovery process, means that we expect, if this was fully rolled out, that would reduce the volume of material going through the energy from waste plant, which we can then sell that spare capacity to help cover the cost or partially offset the cost of taking forward the recycling service as well. So these things are all interlinked.
sounds very good.
Excellent. Before I bring Councillor Gallagher in, I was just wondering whether the people in the 4 trial areas were just going to have to drink white wine from now on.
No, they'll be able to drink their usual Medicells, as long as it's a bottle. That's fine, or a jar.
Excellent.
What we are conscious of, Chair, is the fact that on a 4-weekly cycle, it's quite easy to forget when to put your bin out. So as part of the trial information, I think you've already touched upon it, we are clearly looking to give them, you know, leaflets and to explain the arrangements, to give them stickers to put on the bins for the collection days, to have that accessibility to go through our web page and to be able to check the collection days. But we're also asking them to sign up to a text messaging service, and are offering a cash reward for them to do that, so that they get a text reminder in advance of the collection taking place.
Excellent. Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you very much, Chair. Firstly, I welcome this report. I think it was delivered very, very clearly off the NCC officers, so well done for that one. And a well done to Glenn as well, because Glenn and I had numerous conversations around the recycling program, and it's finally starting to take shape. So I thank you for that. For myself, as a local councillor, and I, you know, as we talk through this scrutiny, everybody thinks of their own little patch. Ashington has its own issues. Now, we're talking about recycling here. Recycling of glass at the moment, but a lot of people talk about the green and blue bins and the black and green bins. But the reality is there are some towns and some areas of my town have got no bins at all. So, you know, I want that conversation to go along parallel with this policy as well, because the reality is it's a bit of a kick in the teeth if you can't get rid of your rubbish and you drop a bin down there to get rid of your bottles. The other thing was I wanted to highlight what Councillor Cardy had said as well. Been very mindful of the timings of emptying your bins, because in Ashington we've got the black and the green bins. The black bins go to landfill, and that's where the food and everything else like that goes into. So if anything, if I was a prolonged delay of picking it up, I think it should be the recycling stuff, your papers, your bottles, because they're the kind of things you can squash down into the bins. But also there's an education there again, which Glenn I have had numerous conversations about. It's education resident of what you can put in the bins, because a lot of people are unsure of what goes into what bins. And I know that I'm going away from the glass recycling a bit, but that had to be spoken about as well. The other thing is cost. Now, I welcome the government, what was the update of the government's policies and future plans, and the possibility of taxing people that actually, you know, promote or give us the wine, the bottles, the pops. So the reality, that's a welcome one. But I'm mindful that this council on this particular recycling program shouldn't just look at the cheapest or the best thing. We should not be conscious of just cost. It should be the thing that promotes the best thing for the county, because this is longevity. This is, and like Councillor Heppel said, it's all about the planet. So same again, just coming back to the idea of, I welcome the report, and I think that there's some good things to look forward to. Sorry, there's one more point that I wanted to make, Chair. We're talking about this policy now and this administration. Now, this trial run will run all the way through until next year, where there will be a new administration. So I think we've got to try and, sorry, Glenn, a different one. But what I'm trying to say is that, you know, whoever takes the Golden up after May of next year has to run with this policy as well. So thank you very much.
I don't know whether you want to come back on that, Paul, and then I've got a couple of things to say.
Just a couple of points, Chair. I think the first one, and Councillor Gallagher's very right. These are long-term strategic decisions. You know, we're just going through our fleet replacement programme. That's £8.2 million worth of investment that will last 6 years. So these go beyond terms of office within administrations, and that's why it's really important to fundamentally get a council-wide consensus that this is the appropriate way to go forward. And clearly, you know, with any change of administration, fundamentally the modelling won't change, the analysis won't change. We need to have that longer-term decision making, because these are long-term investments for the future benefit of the residents of Northumberland. In terms of the containers and the frequency, there are certainly still some households in Northumberland that still rely on a sack-based collection. They are very much in the minority, and it's because they can't accommodate the normal 240 wheel bins because of the nature of the houses and things such as that. That is something that we are conscious of, and more than happily continue that dialogue to look at what improved arrangements, because certainly for some of the areas, and certainly I think the Hurst area in Ashington is probably the one that you're most conscious of, Councillor Gallagher. That is something that, again, we are continuing to look at in terms of how we can move to more communal type containers that still provide an improvement in service and a better containment of waste, for better hygiene, for better environmental standards and all the rest of it.
Okay, is that all right, Brian? Yeah? Your microphone's off.
Sorry, and thank you for the response, Paul. Can I also come back that it's just not about the Hurst, it's probably the central part of Ashington, which covers the central, the Bothell and the Hurst area. So there's quite a number of properties in Ashington that don't have bins at all, green or black. And with that, the bag collection brings its own problems for our frontline services. So for years, we've had conversations around the communal bins. They're a fantastic idea. We've trialed them and they work. I just think they should be spread out a little bit further around the town. And not only my town, because I'm speaking as a Northumberland County Council law, and other communities will have exactly the same problems. So thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for that. Just a couple of things that I wanted to ask. First of all, thank you for a very well written report, as usual. I'm sure a lot of us, the compliments we get about the way that our bin men work is, you know, many. No one has ever complained to me about the service. So well done. And it's not just the guys on the front line; it's all of the management behind it, which are first rate. And it's a well written report. There isn't really. I think we're all agreed that it's the way forward. But what we're concentrating on today is the glass collection trial, which is the thing that's going to happen. Everything else is, you know, relying on other people telling us what's going to happen. So the first thing I just wanted to ask was on page 2. There are 4,000 properties, and it's £62,000 for containers. That's a lot of money for 4,000 containers. I could go down to B&Q and buy something for £1. It would probably do. So that was the first thing. If you just want to collect these, Paul, then I was just paragraph 8 talks about how we're actually going to collect the glass, which is a driver and 2 loaders. I just was wondering how we're going to manage that with the ongoing corona virus restrictions about keeping 2 meters apart and all the rest of that stuff. Are we going to have a vehicle behind with 2 people in that live with each other? You know what I mean? So how we're going to get around that. Also, I have not seen any report produced by any officer that's talking about the impact of not collecting the council tax or the government not giving us the money that we need. You know, there's all this talk about if I had a choice to make between feeding my children and paying my council tax, I know what I would do, and I know what the rest of us would do, would feed our children first. So I'm just starting to worry about, we have these well thought out plans, but we don't necessarily have access to the money to execute them. And I just was wondering whether we're starting to think about how lack of money might alter some of it. Then that's been answered. Then there was near the back of the report, if I can just find it, on page 14. I remember in Blythe Valley days, they used to bring flow charts out, and it was decide, implement, consult, which I always thought was it showed how things work. And on there's a chart on page 14 that says the cabinet decision is going to be made on the 13th. In the leaflets, the residents are going to go out on the 14th. So I just assume that you think that this is just going to get kind of waved through without any, you know, the cabinet itself is, you know, might decide they want to do something else. So that was the other thing. And on page 15 in the summary, it says the government is unlikely to make a decision until late 2020. Well, this is fairly late 2020, and I have seen no, you know, hint of any kind of decision coming from government. So I was just wondering about, you know, when all that might happen. And it is mentioned in the report, but on page 19, there's a photograph of how some of the glass is collected, or some of the, you know, these waste streams are sorted as we go along. And there's a very telling thing on the back of this trailer that says, "Thank you for your patience." Now, it's just, you know, these areas are going to find out how long it takes to collect this, and they're going to also find out. I don't think you're going to need to text anybody, because the people are going to be hearing the glass pouring out of these containers into the back of trucks. And anybody that's been anywhere near a pub when they're doing this will know you can hear that for miles. So are we doing anything about that, or are we just accepting that it's noisy? But, you know, all joking apart, we need to make certain that the people that are doing this for us are properly protected against sound. Are we going to have earplugs? Are it's going to be ear defenders, or are we going to make the thing less noisy? And I think that was me. So if you could answer those, that'd be great.
I think I've got them all listed. So the first one, in terms of the actual cost of containers. So I think when you mention about it's a few quid if you go to B&Q, that's when you start looking at buying boxes and things such as that. We're talking about high quality wheeled bins, and they're around about 15.50 per 140 litre wheeled bin. And that's because it's a larger volume of material that we're collecting. It enables us to wheel that to the back of the vehicle, and it enables the automated lifting mechanism to actually cart that into the back of the vehicle as well. So it reduces the manual handling impact for both the householder and also for our staff. So that's the reason why we're looking at that investment in, and those bins can last anything between 10 to 15 plus years. So they are a long-term investment. And as I said earlier in the discussion, that we're using the standard like grey black body bin, so we can reuse those into the service for single occupancy households if the trial doesn't roll forward. So they won't be wasted, and it won't be money that's you know, abortive expenditure. In terms of the collecting glass and the implications for the staff associated with that, we already, as I'm sure you're well aware, have continued collecting all of our waste materials right through the pandemic. We haven't missed a beat on that, and that's been a real credit to all of the frontline crews, but also the supervisory and the management team, and our colleagues in corporate health and safety that have supported us with that process. So we have put in place very robust arrangements to ensure the safety, the staff work in bubbles, the separate transport arrangements to get them to and from the collection routes. So we're confident that that is all good and it is working. And the dialogue we've had with both the trade unions and with the staff, there hasn't been any complaints whatsoever regarding the way they feel of being treated and managed through this pandemic process in relation to the refuse collection arrangements. On the money issues longer term, certainly, you know, the county council, the pandemic is a significant financial pressure on the county council. It will affect income from a whole host of arrangements, not least, you know, businesses and business rates, people struggling financially in terms of council tax, losing their employment, but also even just when you start talking about trade waste is a significant income generator for the county council. We expect there'll be quite a few of the businesses that we currently provide a service to that we make a return on may well not be here this time next year. So you have that wider financial impact right across the whole organisation, the whole county. And that's something that, you know, has to be taken into account as part of the council's medium-term financial plan budget setting process, and also the expectation that, you know, there will be some support through from government. In terms of the specifics about the waste service itself, the whole ethos of the government strategy is looking at this extended producer responsibility. So it is to effectively make the polluter pay, which is one of the key foundations of environmental legislation. So the people that generate the waste in the first instance, which are the producers of the goods, should be the ones who fundamentally cough up for the whole life cost of that. And that's something that isn't in place at the moment, but clearly is an indication and a statement that has been made that that is something that they are pursuing and do intend to take forward. So we would expect very significant funding streams to become available as part of that government's final strategy, making its way through into legislation. The expectation was that that would be done in 2020. As the report says, it's already moved to late 2020. I think given everything that's going on, I think we're more likely to expect that in 2021. but that's that's beyond our control. That's something that we will keep an eye on and work through our professional groupings within the waste and local government spheres to ensure we keep on top of that and we're aware of the timetable if it does move again. In terms of the timing of the trials, we were hoping to bring this report forward to an earlier meeting and an earlier cabinet. It has been slightly delayed, but we have continued to still work to the timetable that we established ourselves as officers some time ago, and that's not to undermine the democratic process. We're doing some of the work at risk, things like producing leaflets we can do very, very quickly. We've got all of the drafting done of those. It's just really hitting the button on a print machine. And that was the timing of it's really critical in terms of why we want to do it and have the first collections in November. It's because that's the point at which we would get the best return in terms of over Christmas, to make sure we get the Christmas glass that comes out of people's properties. And also November's a really good time of year to start the collections, because that's when the garden waste collections are starting to wane and drop off as well. So in terms of the best time of year to draw a new service forward, this is the correct time to do it. On the noise issue, noise is a key concern for us, and that is something we have looked at very carefully. That certainly the staff involved in the collections will be wearing and will be undertaking noise monitoring activity as part of that. There is a particular type of noise personal protection equipment now that are a type of ear defender that basically cancel out some of the background noise but still enable people to talk to each other. They're like a noise cancelling. So we are looking at those as part of the trial as well. We already use them on some of our highways activities, because clearly we don't want people just wearing bog standard ear defenders that kind of like isolate them from their environment they're working. When they're working in such a dynamic environment, we don't want them stepping out in front of a vehicle and getting hit by a vehicle, for example, because they didn't hear it coming. So we are very conscious of that, and that is part of the trial as well. Last but not least, the sign on the back of the vehicle in the report that says "Be patient." The "Be patient" is there. That's a stillage vehicle where it's a curbside sort. So by its very nature, it means it's parked up for much longer. And the signage on those is because, sadly, you do get people that if they're in a vehicle that pulls up that wants to get past, they won't be patient. They'll try and pull past when people are working on the highway, working on the side of the road, and it's really just there for the actual staff safety more than anything, just to try and reinforce that pay attention to what you're doing. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks for that comprehensive answer. I've got Councillor Carty, then the Leader of the Council.
It was just one more thing, Paul. You know, if we start doing the glass collections like you want to do, and I think it's a really good idea, I absolutely hate those glass recyclable places where people go and push bottles in, because what you find is there's always broken glass around them and things like that, and they're quite unsightly anyway. Will you be getting rid of all of them when this kind of kicks in and starts working properly? You know,
the long-term aspiration would be that if we can roll this out across the whole county, it would effectively remove the need for that. I think there's always going to be some properties where it's not viable to provide a separate collection of glass for, both environmental and cost purposes. So the expectation is that, yes, we would review the number of our bring glass recycling centres. I think we'll always have some, but there would be far fewer of them because we just fundamentally wouldn't need them.
Thank you. Leader?
Thank you very much. Just a couple of quick points, if I may. First of all, I would agree completely what you said, Mr. Chairman, about the staff. I think, like all of us, I'm very proud of the frontline staff who've managed to keep us going throughout all the recent months and the difficulties. But I'm particularly grateful to Paul, because he's a bit of a nerd when it comes to, in the nicest possible way, when it comes to glass recycling and waste management, as everyone knows. It's his passion, and he's incredibly good at it. So we're incredibly lucky to have him. So when we started talking about this, probably, I don't know, at least 2 years ago, Paul, I was keen to just let him just design the scheme and just run with it, as long as we came out with the end result of improving our recycling rate in a sustainable way. So I would say thank you very much to Paul for all the work he's done on this. the big issue for us has been the slow outputs from central government in terms of direction and funding and guidance, which is why we're pressing ahead now. We had wanted to try and include other parts of this, but we've just decided to get going with it because we really must go. But anyone that's been, for example, to Spain or France will see the deposit return schemes there, where they're miles ahead of us, and we've got to get to there as soon as we can. But in the meantime, this is us taking that first step. I think the point about communications that Brian made is dead right. It's actually very sad that Paul and I have been to a number of meetings to talk about this subject. That's all stopped, of course, in the spring. And we started a program of site visits to the Sleekburn site for all manner of different groups and individuals, which was going really well, but that's had to stop largely as well. But it is very important that we take people with us, Brian, you're dead right. The trial sites, that point Paul will address, but it was very much down to officers as to which places we took on. And then the final point is around the budget. We are going to have an exceptionally difficult budget this year. There's no question about it. And this was one thing that we looked at to see whether we should continue to go ahead with it. And I think we must, given the fact that it is important. It's an integral part of our climate change action plan. And therefore, for that reason, we're pressing ahead with it and would appreciate any recommendations or help you can give with us in advance of the cabinet meeting. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Leader. I think, did Councillor Carty indicate, oh, she's spoken again, hasn't she? That's fine. So can I just say that we're in favour of the recommendations as written, and we wish the scheme well. I don't think we wanted to change any of it, but when it comes to the review, which I take it will be this time next year, I would hope that whoever is sitting in these various rooms about the place, whoever's in the chair and whoever's on here, would want to see how it's gone and do of what's how the process has worked. So are we content that we accept the report? We haven't got anything we want to change, but we would like to have a proper scrutiny of how it's actually worked this time next year. I can see everybody nodding, so that Nicola, you're going to write that in the recommendations from us, yeah? And presumably I shall be turning up at the cabinet next week to deliver it. Yep, okay. Thank you all very much. I don't think Paul needs to stay. So if he feels as though he needs to go, that'll be fine. Thank you for coming and being your usual brilliant self. And we move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the improvement action plan for the fire and rescue service. Does Councillor Riddle want to say something first and then I bring the officers in? Yep. Okay.
Yes, I will, Jeff. I want to start by saying that as portfolio holder, I'm extremely proud of the fire and rescue service and the staff within it. Just to set the scene a little bit, just to remind members that, we are the smallest mainland brigade in England with the smallest budget. Having said that, we are innovative. We have delivered this last year, despite COVID, our first in-house recruitment and training program in 40 years, and something which we are going to definitely continue with. And also just to say, we're not just a fire and rescue service. That service has really supported communities together and delivering medicines and PPE and all the rest through the COVID pandemic. But to go back to late in 2018, we had our first HMI inspection, and this was the first inspection in 10 years, really. And it was it's worth noting that we were actually in the early tranche of the inspections, so nobody actually knew what the inspectors were looking for and which boxes we had to tick. We did get a requires improvement rating, but it wasn't something that we were particularly surprised about. We certainly didn't get an unsafe service, which some services did get. But having said that, we had our hot debrief early the next year. And as soon as we got that, we embarked on this improvement programme. And with that, I'll hand over to Paul or Mark to take you through the improvement programme, Chairman.
I think Paul is the one that's actually live, so he'll be doing it, I take it. Carry on, Paul.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you for that introduction from Councillor O'Rill. Yes, thank you for the opportunity just to update Scrutiny Committee on the progress we've made against the Improvement Action Plan. Although John's given a little bit of background there, it may be helpful just to do a little recap for members. So this the inspection by Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services. It took place back in October 29th to November 3rd, 2018. And as John said, this was the first time we've been independently assessed and inspected for 10 years. Not wanting to contradict me, Fire Authority Chair, we're actually the smallest fire and rescue service in the UK, not just England. So that's something else to bear in mind. We received the final HMI report into the service on the 20th of June 2019. And the reason there was such a long delay was the view of the HMI at that time was that they would inspect services in tranches of 15 fire and rescue services and only release the reports when all 15 had been inspected. So that created quite a lag in terms of our ability to formalise what our improvement action plan would be. As John's already said, on effectiveness, efficiency and people and leadership, we were graded as requiring improvement. Now, that wasn't a surprise to us, I have to say, because I think it's important to bear in mind that the inspection and grading criteria and the scoring matrix is applied to all services, all 45 services in England independently as an overarching document. So it does not take into account size, resources, capacity, budget, or whether you're covering a very large geographical area or you're a metropolitan with a very tight and compact service delivery area. Included within the report for Scrutiny's information is the 23 areas for improvement which were identified by HMI. So they are attached as an appendix for you to review at your leisure. And I think it's important to say that although we got requires improvement, the government's expectation of every fire and rescue service in England is that we should be at least good. There's a further category which is outstanding above that. So that is really something for us to aim for as an aspirational target. One thing which was clear was because the areas for improvement identified by the HMI cut across multiple service delivery areas within Northumberland Fire and Rescue Service, our actions to respond to those improvement areas, we felt it would be better if we grouped them together. So they have been formed into 12 themes which are listed within the report. I don't intend to run through them, but they cover a very wide range of areas such as leadership and culture, all the way through to our operational response delivery. Elected members may be interested to know that we've actually developed 2 improvement action plans. We felt this was important. One is internal, which drives the project management of our plan to make sure that we can continue to deliver the improvements that both the County Council, ourselves in Fire and Rescue Service and the HMI would expect to see following the report. But the other one is a more outward external facing document, which is there for members of the public to review. And it's our attempt just to be transparent about the issues which are affecting the service and which were highlighted. And that follows much more of a narrative theme. So it's along the lines of what we aim to achieve and what we've achieved so far. So it's a bit more of an easier read and a bit more visually eye-catching. The links to that, if you're interested, were included in the report. And what we also did for internal staff was try to capture all of the improvement actions which we need to undertake on a sort of journey board and a storyboard. Those of you with keen eyesight will notice that the deadline for delivery of all of that on the storyboard, which is included as Appendix B to the report, was December 2020. So obviously we do have some revisions to make in that respect. Up until COVID, the COVID crisis starting in March, I think I could reassure Scrutiny that we were making really good progress against the improvement actions. John's already alluded to the fact that when the COVID crisis hit, everything within Fire and Rescue Service slowed down significantly in terms of delivery against the plan, because our whole focus shifted to maintaining our critical service functions, supporting the county council's COVID response, and through our support to the communities together who are most vulnerable in our communities. I'm pleased to say that as we've moved out of the initial first wave of COVID and from the initial response which we undertook, we've now started full delivery again against the improvement action plan. So we've lost around about 6 months, but we recognise that progress needs to be made and needs to be caught up quickly. One of the things which I think I do need to bring to your attention is that written throughout and alluded to throughout the HMI report into the service was our capacity and resource capability. Now, I'm really pleased to say that we've had some really good support from the County Council and Cabinet in terms of addressing some of that capacity issue, and we've had around about 300,000 invested back into the service since the HMI were here in late 2018. That's allowed us to put some additional posts and establishment into our prevention teams, so our community safety teams, our fire safety protection staff, our communications and community engagement teams, and also we're currently just finishing off the recruitment of another principal officer for the service, which will allow us to really improve our strategic capacity, which was something which was quoted on a number of times within the report. The report then leads into giving some detail to Scrutiny members on the actions we've taken in terms of each of the 12 themes. You'll be pleased to hear I don't intend just to sort of go through them individually. The cover pages 4 to 8 of the report, but I think there are some themes I would like to just quickly pull out and draw to your attention. I'm not suggesting that means they're any more important than any of the other areas we're focusing on, but theme 1 covers leadership and culture. And I think this is important because this is not just an issue which was raised for Northumberland Fire and Rescue Service. The culture and staff engagement was an issue the HMI commented on at length within the overarching State of Fire report, which was released at the end of last year. So there is a real focus on improving the culture within the Fire and Rescue Service, not just within Northumberland, but across the sector. So a lot of our efforts and energy and commitment will be going into, and has been, into improving that. So that's to make sure that we improve our engagement with our staff, we become more inclusive, we try to get our staff involved in shaping the direction of the service. And in terms of practical issues which will arise out of that, we're looking to really revise and reinvigorate our recruitment, our retention, and our promotion processes. And the second area I would just like to comment on is theme 2, actually, and that's community risk and strategic planning. The reason I'd like to bring that to your attention is because we are seen at the moment as being at the forefront of UK Fire and Rescue Service innovation in this area. So we've commissioned some work from an external consultancy company who have come in and allowed us to really drill down into the causal factors of many of our risks and incident types. And the reason that's important is because it will be fundamental to shaping our strategic plan, which we are going to start writing at the end of the year. We'll cover the period 2021 to 2025, and it will really set the tone and direction of how we use our resources to mitigate the risks to our community over that period. We've started attracting a lot of interest from other fire and rescue services, so we're really keen to know how we are applying it. So I think that's something which, in terms of being at the forefront of the fire and rescue service sector, it's something we're very proud of within the Northumberland. The only other couple which I'd like to mention specifically are theme 6, which was finance. At the time of the inspection report, we were obviously graded requiring improvement on our efficiency. Now, what stacked up very well for us in terms of efficiency is the fact that we are the smallest fire and rescue service, trying to do everything that all of the other services within England are doing, but with a lot less capacity and resource. So in that terms, we are incredibly lean and efficient. However, at the time the inspection took place, we were looking at a very significant savings profile, which did raise some issues for the inspector in terms of what the impact of that efficiency would be if it was fully realised and delivered. I'm really pleased that Cabinet and Executive have taken the inspector report on board and have identified and acknowledged that that was going to be a considerable ask for the service. So the significant total which was in place at the time of inspection has been removed. We still have, as with all other parts of the County Council, our bit to play in terms of delivering a balanced budget. So we've got a reduced savings efficiency, which I think is manageable for the service. And I think even if nothing else changed in terms of the efficiency pillar, which we were inspected under, the next time round HMI come back, just because that efficiency target has been removed, I think it'll put us in a much better place to improve. That requires improvement to at least a good. And the only other point I would like to specifically draw out, Chair, is theme 10, which is response delivery. So obviously what we, because we have such a large geographical area to cover, and 70% of that area is covered specifically by on-call retained firefighters operating from 11 dedicated on-call facilities, our response delivery model is sometimes quite challenging. So all I would point to is the fact that as an area of focus for the service, we have some clear plans in terms of how we are looking to improve the fire cover availability across the retained, and looking to improve just our operating model based on a risk reduction methodology to make sure that we can have the right resources in the right place at the right time to address our community and county risk profile. The other 8 areas within the themes are there for you just to review at your leisure. What I would just like to mention is that there is still further work streams to be started, actually. So although I think we've made very good progress against the improvement action plan, there is a short bulleted list at the end of the report which just gives some indication of the further work streams which we need to start. And quite clearly at the top of that is issues around culture, looking to continue to look for innovative ways of recruiting RDS and on-call staff and retaining them quite importantly. And then, as I've just mentioned, developing our emergency response ways of working to maximise operational availability. So a lot has been done, even with the 6-month hiatus which COVID introduced, but still quite clearly a lot for us to continue to work at. In terms of where we are with the national inspection process, had COVID not occurred, we were due to be inspected second time round in March next year. So 1st of March 2021, with a discovery week where the team comes in to get a feel for the service, taking place in early February. That obviously is not happening now, and the best indications which we have from speaking to the inspectorate is that we're probably at least 10 months, I guess, out from when we may be inspected again. So pleasingly, that does give us time to both address the areas which we're currently working on, but to make some real progress and accelerate delivery against those areas where we possibly haven't made as much progress as we would have liked. The only other thing I think I need to mention, Chair, in terms of the inspectorate is the HMI have recognised that because the whole second inspection wave and process has had to be significantly delayed because of COVID, they have undertaken to ensure that they can still deliver a state of fire report at the end of this year by undertaking themed inspections on how well fire and rescue services within England have responded to the COVID-19 crisis. And that includes everything from how well we've maintained business as usual, how well we've still managed our operational response, whether we've had very resilient and safe workplaces and ways of working for our staff, but also that much broader extension of how we've supported county councils, local authorities, NHS in their response to the pandemic. That inspection and assessment starts next week. It's virtual. It's all going to be telephone based. So there are 7 key individuals who've been identified by the HMI who they want to speak to. Myself and the deputy chief are 2 of them. Councillor Riddle, the Fire Authority Chair, is another. But it also includes colleagues from HR and finance within the county council. What that will lead to is a narrative verdict, a narrative assessment of how well we've done, which we will be informed by letter. And the 45 thematics will, as I say, go towards the production of the Chief HMI State of Fire report later in this year. In summary, Chair, I would say that I think we've made good progress given the challenges and the circumstances that we've had to work to, but we really need to accelerate our actions and activity to make sure that if we are 9, 10, 11 months out from the next full weeks-long inspection by HMI, we're really well positioned to move Northumberland Fire and Rescue Service from requires improvement to what I would say is at least 2 goods and very hopefully 3. And what I would also say, Chair, is that I'm very happy to come back in future to give regular updates on our progress against the improvement action plan ahead of the next round of inspections. And I'll just leave it there if that's okay, and I'm happy to take any questions.
That's excellent, Paul. Thank you very much for that very comprehensive canter through where we are at the moment. Questions, anybody? You see, you've stunned them all into silence. Well, I shall kick off then, and if other people want to think of anything, then obviously just raise your hand and I'll see it. Just to go back to something that both Councillor Riddle and yourself alluded to, which is the size of the fire and rescue service we have. You know, not only are we maybe the smallest by personnel, but we've got to be the biggest in England by area, haven't we? I mean, you know, that
Actually, 7th. Well, the 7th largest fire and rescue service in England.
You know, well, so
due to a couple of amalgamations, I have to say, though.
Yeah, well, you know, so Northumberland is always going to be difficult to inspect because of, you know, we're at both ends of the spectrum at the same time. And I do wish sometimes these inspectors were thinking about the circumstances they find themselves in, rather than here is the framework, you've got to fit in it. You know, we are unique. So I just wish sometimes when you think you know, the places that they consider we require improvement, it is actually all about resource. And I must take my share of the responsibility for the lack of resource that the fire and rescue service were given, because it was seen as, you know, all of the three administrations that have run the council since it became a unitary have always made certain that the front end was properly resourced and, you know, had properly trained people using the latest equipment. But where we had to make savings, we took it out the back end, and that is where we're being told it requires improvement. And I'm glad to see that the current administration have decided that enough is enough. And if it's at all possible, the fire and rescue service should be given the resources it needs to fill in the spaces at the back. But other than that, you know, the report is what it is. You're doing your best to address the shortcomings that you were told you had, which, as I say, I don't think was really, you know, the fire service's fault. But I was just wondering, to bring my remarks to a close, I was just wondering how well we did compared with the other 15 that had their inspection at the same time. You know, what you look at your own failings, if you like, but where do we sit in that tranche of 15?
It's difficult to it's difficult to see where we sit within that tranche of 15, because what was inspected as a mix, Chair, was county council authorities, combined authorities, fire and rescue services under PCC, or police and fire and crime commissioner leadership, and metropolitans. What I could say to you is, on the overall view of the 45 English fire and rescue services, we certainly weren't bottom of the assessment list by any stretch. We were probably just below the average. There were services who were larger than us, were probably better resourced than us, who ended up receiving what the HMI issue are as letters of concern. And that constitutes an immediate action where they think there's something which is significantly in need of immediate redress, and that then results in a follow-up inspection by the HMI within a couple of weeks. Obviously, we didn't have any of that, which was obviously very pleasing. And I think where we have gotten to is you've alluded to historical efficiencies in the past, Chair. What we've always done in fire and rescue service is make us save efficiencies to support and to recognise our contribution, which we have to make to the county council's balancing of its budget. But we would only put savings and efficiencies forward where we think that we will retain a safe and viable service. So yeah, you know, we are caught in this whole issue where there isn't a great deal of discretion allowed within the inspection process to properly compare resourcing of services with each other. But I have to say, I'm much more encouraged by where we are going to be second time round than where we were first time round. I think we've got the organisational. We'd lost a lot of the organisational knowledge of how to actually physically go through a very detailed and inspection process. We've got that back. I think the investment and the new that we've brought in, we've got enough time to properly embed those within the structures before the next round of inspections. So I'm really encouraged on where I think we have got some very clear and deliverable improvements which we can make to the service. And just coming back, I'll just end on the issue which you mentioned about it was funny you said that. We've got some really unique challenges because during the feedback that we, as part of the process, we had to give a 3-hour strategic overview of the service to the main HMI, who was responsible for our northern area, and five of his team. And in conclusion, when HMI Matt Power was summing up, he actually did say that I go to a lot of police forces, I go to a lot of fire and rescue services, and I often hear we're short of cash, we're short of resource, we're short of capacity. But what he did say at that time was, in his view, Northumberland Fire and Rescue Service was quite unique in terms of the combined challenges and impact of our capacity, resources, geographical area, our demographics, and at the time our future efficiency profile. So we are in a different place to other services. We are in a fairly unique position amongst the 45 English fire and rescue services. But I'm really encouraged that we're definitely in a much better place second time around than we were when we had that initial inspection in October 2018.
Excellent. I still have Brian Gallagher.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome this report, and I do understand what you're saying about how this report's folded out. But the reality is, you are unique. You're not average. And as far as I've been, as long as I've been a county councillor, I'm very proud to have the fire brigade operate whatever administration has been in charge. Very, very proud of you. The one thing that I've always done through scrutiny is to thank various departments within Northumberland County Council about how they've reacted and worked through COVID-19. I want to take this occasion as well to say thank you very much on behalf of the residents of Northumberland of everything that you've done. And same again, you've got my 100% backing. I really, really admire the work that you do for Northumberland. Thank you.
Well, there we are. You can't ask for a better endorsement than that, can you? Councillor Heppel.
Right, I'm just having difficulty finding the button here again. I mean, as somebody who's managed to government inspections in the past, I'm acutely aware of how difficult and how intense they are. I mean, people haven't gone through it. I mean, the intensity is incredible. It's non-stop. And it applies after the event as well, because you have to be seen to be actually improving things. And can I just make one comment? I think that I would like to commend Paul and the rest of his staff on this really well done in terms of the response to this inspection report. I mean, having managed that in the past, some of the stuff he's put in here, you know, I recall it from when I was doing it. So the secret, I think, is to keep on improving, I think, and not take your foot off the gas in some ways. And I'm sure Paul, from what he's done in terms of responding to this inspection report, will not allow that to happen. I just want to commend him and his staff for the fantastic response he's had to this.
Excellent.
I'll be sure to pass that on, because I'm just very fortunate to sit at the head of this organisation. It's the people who work across all of our service delivery areas and work from fire stations, and who give an amazing commitment as on-call firefighters across the vast majority of Northumberland, who actually deliver what needs to be delivered on behalf of the service.
Councillor Riddle.
Thank you, Jeff. I think you've all been very kind to us, but, you know, I think you've been honest as well. Just 2 points, really. You know, we talked about budgets before. You know, I did really press hard to get that £960,000 savings target removed when we had the inspection, because, you know, I thought, what's the point of having cuts and then having to put money back in when we knew that there would be things to do? So, you know, I think the Cabinet, you know, I thank the rest of the Cabinet members for listening to us and taking that on board. I think the £100,000 saving we've got to make for this year, we have already identified between us, I think, and that is quite manageable. You know, we have also got the legacy of what happened at Grenfell and that disaster there, and the fact that that reminded all fire services that, you know, prevention and inspection has to be tougher and more to the forefront. And I think, you know, one of our asks of government is that there's money put back in for that. So, you know, I think that we are sitting in not such a bad position. I am sure that, and I'm confident with the, we have just concluded a very successful interview process. I can't announce who it is at the moment, but I can just tell you that the person we've got, in my opinion, will be a first-class asset to add to the strength of both Paul and Mark there. And, you know, I'm sure that we will get there, and I'm very confident that we will get a much improved grading this next time, which in my opinion won't be until this time next year. Thank you very much, everyone.
No problem. Right, so where we are, and the recommendations are just purely to note and provide comments, which we've done, and invite further reports as necessary to provide the assurance, which I'm sure we can have. And the only thing I would like to add is, after this thing that's happening to you next week, and it's being just it added to a national report, is there some worth in you coming back to talk to that when it's out?
Absolutely, Chair. I get a one-to-one hot debrief shortly after the inspection has concluded, where I'm told what the narrative judgment of the service and how we responded to COVID will be. That's then followed up in a formal letter from the inspectorate. So that would seem to be an appropriate point when we get the formal letter back from the HMI for me to contact Sean and see if we can come back and update at a future scrutiny.
So are we all agreed that that's what we do? I think it is. So excellent. Thanks for that, Councillor Riddle. Thanks for that, Paul. So we then will move on to the next item on the agenda. And I think, Sean, if you're still with us, did you want to contribute to this little bit?
Yep, here I am, Chairman. Notwithstanding what Paul's just said about coming back after receiving the letter, we'll obviously program that in
Excellent.
at the appropriate time. The one thing just to note and confirm what I said at the last meeting is that the main change to the work programme is the COVID recovery update, which is going to Cabinet on Tuesday, and then we'll be going to all 4 scrutiny committees in November. And it will be much the same way as we did that in July, where a lot of the issues that were raised then hopefully will have been resolved, and it's just an opportunity to report back and to give members an update on where we are with the COVID recovery plan. Obviously, the situation is evolving and changing all the time. So there may well be additional reporting to what goes to Cabinet next week.
Okay, does anyone have anything they want to say to Sean at all? In connection with this, obviously. Great. So the next item on the agenda is any urgent business. I have not been notified of anybody, of any of them. So with that, I should bring the meeting to a close. I hope our 2 new members have enjoyed themselves and felt as though they could contribute if they wanted to. And I look forward to seeing you all at some point. And we have the leader back. Did he want to say anything, or was he just listening?
I would just like to say how brilliantly you chaired that meeting.
Thank you.
No, but thank you very much. And I did appreciate I really did appreciate the comments about the glass recycling. And we'll keep you posted on that as we go along. Thank you very much.
Great. And I would just remind you all to buy my book. We'll see you all next time. Bye.
Bye.